Every city has a story. Some are written in brick and steel. Others are carried quietly by the rivers that run through them.
From a city's perspective, our goal is to ensure that the community remains safe, and it does.
In the one spot that they measured, and to use their language, the discharge of PCBs is continuous and significant. It's 908 times provincial limit.
That's dangerous.
Almost 1,000 times what the provincial guidelines call for.
12 Mile Creek helped build St. Catharines. It powered industries, shaped neighborhoods, and became part of the city's identity.
What I try to remind folks, though, is people push and they want the city to take control over that. They want the city to take down all of these things. And I've said, everybody thinks you can just recoup the money later. That's not necessarily the case.
There are provincial policies in place that would let the city take action too. We have an incomplete demolition site. The city has the right to go in there and complete that demolition and bill the landowner. And we have a dangerous site for citizens. Again, the city has the right to go in there and remedy that situation and bill the landowner.
But rivers don't just carry water, they carry history. They carry the legacy of the decisions we make and the consequences of the ones we don't.
We know that it's a scar on the city. We know that it's a brownfield with environmental contamination.
This case, if you want to call it, is moving forward at the pace of bureaucracy, and we're not satisfied with that. We think this is a human and environmental health issue. We think that there needs to be a sense of urgency. And we also have a concern because PCBs are one of the most dangerous chemicals out there.
Broken River is an investigative documentary series exploring environmental stewardship, political accountability, corporate responsibility, and the growing disconnect between the promises made to communities and the realities they are left to live with. Because sometimes what is broken isn't the river at all. Sometimes it's the institutions entrusted to protect it. Long before these buildings stood silent, this was the heartbeat of St. Catharines. For more than a century, the General Motors plant wasn't simply a factory. It was where generations built their livelihoods. Families built their futures here. Neighborhoods grew around it. Local businesses flourished because of it. And every morning, thousands of workers crossed these gates, believing they were helping to build something that would last. 12 Mile Creek helped make it all possible. For generations, its waters powered local industry, fueled prosperity, and helped transform a growing community into one of Canada's manufacturing centers. But prosperity has a way of leaving quietly. In 2010, General Motors closed the plant. 4 years later, the property was sold. What followed wasn't renewal, it was a dismantling. Machinery quietly disappeared. Valuable materials were stripped away for profit. Buildings were left exposed to the elements. Roofs collapsed, concrete cracked, steel rusted, and nature slowly reclaimed what industry and capital abandoned. Today, 55 acres remain suspended between the city's past and a future that has yet to arrive. When General Motors left, another promise arrived. In 2014, the former GM lands were purchased by Bayshore Groups. For many residents, there was reason to hope. A new owner meant a new beginning. The possibility that one of St. Catharines' largest industrial scars might finally be transformed. But as we know, that's not what happened. Instead, the site entered a very different chapter. Over the next several years, valuable machinery disappeared. Industrial equipment was removed. Copper, steel, and other recyclable materials were stripped away from the property. Buildings that had stood for generations were partially demolished, then abandoned. The work stopped, but the deterioration didn't. Rain entered through broken roofs, walls collapsed, concrete crumbled. Every season, the property became a little more dangerous and a little less valuable. What remained wasn't a redevelopment project, it was a landscape suspended between demolition and renewal, a place where much of the value had already been extracted, while the cost of cleaning up what remained was left behind. As the buildings continued to decay, another question began to emerge. Who was actually responsible for this property? And perhaps more importantly, who benefited from leaving it exactly as it was? Abandoned buildings rarely tell the whole story. To understand why this property remained in limbo for so long, you have to look beyond the fences and follow the paper trail. The former General Motors property has passed through a complex network of companies and individuals connected to Bayshore Groups. Messy public records show that many of the people behind those companies do not live or work in St. Catharines, yet, despite living elsewhere, have become active participants in the city's municipal political process. Municipal campaign contributions are legal. They are a normal part of democracy, and by themselves, they do not establish wrongdoing or improper influence, but they can provide insight into who chooses to invest in local political campaigns. Public election records show donations connected to individuals associated with the ownership of the former GM lands to municipal campaigns of outgoing Mayor Matt Sisko and City Councilor Robin McPherson. Those same records also show that several donors were not residents of St. Catharines. That raises an obvious question. Why would individuals with no residence in the city take such an interest in its municipal elections? Were they simply supporting candidates whose vision they shared? Were they protecting a significant business investment? Or was it something else entirely? The public records don't answer those questions, but they do show that relationships existed. These relationships did not begin with the current council. They span multiple municipal administrations. During Walter Senzik's tenure as mayor, the future of the former GM lands remained a recurring issue at City Hall. The ownership changed, promises changed, political leadership changed, but the condition of the property changed very little. Whether those relationships influence decisions is ultimately for the public to judge. This documentary makes no allegations of unlawful conduct, but transparency matters, especially when one of the largest contaminated properties in the city remains unresolved more than a decade after it was sold. And when political donations, ownership records, and public decision-making intersect, scrutiny is not only reasonable, it's essential. Those relationships alone don't explain why the site remains untouched. To understand that, we have to look at one of the institutions responsible for enforcing these rules, the city of St. Catharines itself.
As a mother and resident, I'm deeply concerned over public safety. The overhead structure is sitting on a site that has sat vacant for years. We stood outside a fresco in January in the freezing cold, and I mean, it was freezing cold.
Ms. Kennedy, this is not about the petition. I said you could speak to the report that is directly related to this, but you're not doing that. So if you're not going to speak to it, then we will have to end the delegation because
the people that signed our 1,200 signatures on our petition asked us to make it safe. They didn't say how exactly to make that happen. They didn't say just look at the catwalk or look at the overhead structure, but they said please make us safe. It's not only the overhead structure that's dangerous, it's every structure on the property.
Ms. Kennedy, that is not up for debate this evening. This evening's debate is very clearly centered around the motion as it was written and submitted. We are not speaking to any other aspects of the site. We are not speaking to any other aspects of the property.
With all due respect, Mayor, if the bylaws that we're requesting be reviewed, there wouldn't be a catwalk situation to be worried about.
Ms. Kennedy, there is nothing in this motion that speaks to bylaws being reviewed.
In January, our coalition collected over 1,200 petition signatures urging the city to enforce the situation regarding the overhead structure.
Ms. Kennedy, I'm going to ask the council coordinator. No, ma'am. There is a motion. It speaks specifically to reviewing the current condition of the overhead structure.
Right.
This is not about the petition. A motion was passed several meetings ago asking for staff to report back on that. There will be a time to speak on that at this time. That is not the purpose. Mr. Smith, you can leave if you are instructing from the gallery. Mr. Smith, there is not to be any outbursts, and there was a time. Kick me out or let me sit. Mr. Smith, you are not to instruct people from the gallery. You understand the rules of this chamber. You have been here many times. I understand what's going on. So, Mr. Smith, you're not to instruct people from the gallery.
If the overhead structure collapses, if the engineering report is not total or is not complete, or if anything happens to anyone, it would be tragic but predictable. The site already attracts youth, and the photos show how dangerous it is. When a city knows of a hazard and fails to act, this inaction carries moral and legal risk.
So, Mr. Russell,
yes.
If this isn't directly related to the overhead structure, then we can't continue because that's not the subject of the motion.
Okay. I thought I'd just slip that in anyways.
I figured as much, and I figured I'd give you the opportunity to complete your sentence.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
I try to be polite even when we're being confrontational.
I'm representing me because I will tell you, I moved here 10 years ago, and I remember driving down Ontario Street and seeing the catwalk across the building and wondered why it was there. 10 years have gone by. I've never seen anybody on it, but every time I go by, I wonder when there's going to be an accident. I'm horrified when I think of the traffic, the buses, the transit, the school buses, people's cars, cyclists, pedestrians. What are you going to do if the damn thing falls down? You have to deal with it, and the city has to deal with it. And quite frankly, you have the power to do something about it. I my understanding is we elect council to look after public safety. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge public safety issue. Thank you.
No engineer has put a stamp on the structural integrity of the building that it's attached to on the west
Counselor,
side.
listen, I'm not going to argue with you about what engineers do and don't do. If you'd like to change your motion, you need a different motion. But right now, the motion that you have is the motion on the floor, and we have a report that addresses directly the motion that you have on the floor.
I'll defer to my seconder if he would like to.
Okay, folks, stop talking from the gallery. Thank you. Or else we'll clear the gallery, and I don't want to do that. You made a request. The owner went and fulfilled the request that's in the motion without needing to be without a motion being passed. They paid for it. Now you're asking for something different, and you're asking them to pay for it again.
Municipal councils rely on rules to ensure meetings remain orderly, fair, and efficient. Those rules exist to protect democracy, to ensure every voice has an opportunity to be heard. But rules can also be used in another way. Critics argue that procedure can become a powerful tool, not simply to manage debate, but to prevent it. Whether the examples you just watched reflect the proper application of council rules or an effort to silence uncomfortable conversations is ultimately for you to decide. But consider this. Mayor Matt Cisco has repeatedly assured residents that the former GM site is safe and secure. He controls the council agenda. Public records also show campaign contributions connected to individuals associated with the property's ownership. Yet time and again, when residents attempt to bring the former GM site before council, the discussion ends before it truly begins. If the site is safe, why avoid the debate? If the evidence is clear, why stop the questions? And if residents have nothing to fear, why are so many struggling to be heard?
Company Bayshore Groups purchased the property in 2014 and began demolition shortly after. The city of St. Catharines says it conducted an assessment of the site last week after receiving a number of complaints. Inspectors found that part of the roof and several walls on the remaining properties at 282 and 285 Ontario Street were already collapsing and at risk of crumbling further. The city is ordering the building owners to either repair the damage or start the process of demolishing the structure, with the hope of building something new on the property eventually.
So as before, please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Sabrina Hill, and I'm a resident of the city of St. Catharines.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this arbitration is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I so affirm.
Okay, you may proceed.
Through you, Chair, hello members of the committee. When I wrote this, I did not know whether the owners before you today intended to appeal this order or whether they intended to seek yet another extension. In many respects, however, that distinction is irrelevant. The fundamental facts remain unchanged. The current owners have had more than a decade to meaningfully manage, remediate, and develop this site. and they have failed to do so. Over that same period, contaminants have continued to leach into the surrounding environment. Nearby waterways remain at risk. Soil contamination remains a concern. Residents now face the additional prospect of asbestos in the soil, a material that can become airborne and spread beyond the property's boundaries. I have toured this site extensively by air legally, including as recently as July 21st. I have provided the committee with photographic evidence. I don't know if you were able to. I'll continue while they're sorting that out. During a recent phone call with a concerned resident struggling to find the words to describe what remains there, the closest we could come to when characterizing the conditions of the property was that it was an end-of-days set piece straight out of Fallujah in the early days of Operation Phantom Fury. What exists on both the east and west side of the property, or Ontario Street, can only be described as a surreal, post-apocalyptic hellscape. A scene that feels less like an industrial property awaiting development and more like something from a William Blake fever dream. Littered across the site are vast quantities of broken glass, tetanus-topped rebar, dangling electric wire, deep auburn pools of stagnant diesel, and mossy-colored quagmires of nauseous chemicals. Standing water collects throughout the property, slowly seeping into the subterranean oubliettes at the foundation. All the while, wildlife continues to drink and bathe in it. For years, residents have been told that the property is safe and secure. My observations suggest otherwise. Fencing and gates are in serious disrepair, only being occasionally repaired. I have personally witnessed substantial deadfalls on both sides of the property, some only being walled off on 3 out of 4 sides. There's one right there, in fact. Areas that once contained underground infrastructure, piping, and industrial systems have deteriorated into flooded voids that continue to undermine already failing foundations. For more than a decade, this community has watched the 4 horsemen draw even closer to this property, not because the dangers are unknown, but because decisive action has perpetually remained over the horizon. The biblical book of Revelation speaks of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: conquest, war, famine, and death. Conquest, because delay has become strategy. War, because residents have spent years battling simply to have obvious dangers acknowledged. Famine, because this community has been starved of accountability and meaningful action. And death, because every year that passes increases the risk posed to the environment, the wildlife, and the public. The arduous march through the city's labyrinth process to get us from this point has often felt like an exercise in logic designed by M.C. Escher himself. Yet despite the delays, the studies, the reports, the hearings, and the promises, the site remains in a condition that no reasonable person could describe as acceptable. If an appeal is being requested, I urge the committee to uphold the order. If an extension is being sought, it should not be open-ended. It should be tied to strict benchmarks, firm deadlines, publicly reported progress, and meaningful enforcement mechanisms, and those should those benchmarks not be met. I would also ask this committee to reflect on a simple question of fairness. Ordinary homeowners in this city are expected to comply with property standard orders. They do not receive unlimited time. They do not receive endless second chances. Not to plagiarize the previous speaker, this was a complete coincidence. A 70-year-old widow can find herself facing enforcement action over a disquieted dandelion-filled front yard. Yet the owners of this property, or their lenders, have been afforded more than a decade to address the conditions that pose demonstrable and existential risks to the environment and the community, and the bylaw officers that have to service this area. Whether that perception is fair or not, many residents have come to believe that one set of rules applies to ordinary citizens and another applies to well-resourced corporate property owners with close personal ties to some elected officials. Public confidence in municipal enforcement depends on demonstrating that the same standards apply to everyone. After more than a decade, the time for explanations has passed. The time for action is now. Thank you.
Every city leaves something behind. Sometimes it's a legacy, sometimes it's a warning. The story of the former General Motors lands is still being written. Courtrooms will decide some questions. History may answer others. But one question remains. What kind of legacy will St. Catharines choose to leave behind? Because rivers don't forget. They carry our history and the consequences of what we leave behind. This is Broken River. The story continues in part 3.